If Syracuse follows these three keys against Stanford tomorrow night, not only will they beat Stanford, they will destroy Stanford.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, Syracuse is playing Stanford tomorrow night at 7:30 inside the Dome, the Friday Night Lights. I cannot wait. Syracuse is an 8.5-point favorite to get the W, and to be honest with you, if you are a betting person, if Syracuse follows these three keys that we're going over on today's podcast, they are going to blow out Stanford. They got to attack Stanford's weak secondary and pass rush. They got to contain Stanford's mobile quarterbacks, not just quarterbacks. They got two of them, and one of which we definitely know of in Justin Lamson, a Syracuse transfer. And, well, Stanford has one really, really good weapon on offense. Elic Ayomanor, the wide receiver, he's ultra talented, 1,000 yards last season. They have to double cover him. They cannot let him run wild. In other words, make someone else on their offense beat them. If they can follow those three keys, Syracuse will definitely win, and they will probably blow out Stanford. So that's what we're going over here on today's podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, so that's only 3 days, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so Stanford's secondary is weak, and their pass rush is weak. Before we get to that, I would like to mention that I saw on Twitter before recording this podcast that Emily Liker mentioned that in a radio interview with Fran Brown, that Justice Ross Simmons looks like he's going to be available for this game against Stanford. Now, for those that may not know, Justice Ross Simmons is the Colorado State transfer that we really had high hopes for, but he has been dealing with a hamstring injury, a nagging hamstring injury for quite some time. So if he goes, I'm very curious to see how Syracuse will use him in their offense, considering they got a boatload of weapons right now. So where is he going to fit in? I don't know, but it's certainly something to look out for tomorrow night if Justice Ross Simmons is available to play. Overall, Stanford's got one really good corner. They got one. His name is Colin Wright, and in 2023, he was Pac-12 honorable mention for Freshman Defensive Player of the Year. Yes, I know it's a mouthful. Freshman Defensive Player of the Year, honorable mention. What does that tell you? Colin Wright is a pretty good corner for Stanford. But aside from that, they don't got much else. They really don't. And I mean that respectfully. I got stats to back this up. Stanford has let up nearly 280 passing yards per game through 2 weeks. That includes a game against Cal Poly a couple weeks ago. Cal Poly, the immortal Cal Poly, one of the football's greatest powers. I'm kidding. 280 passing yards per game through 2 games. So for some context for you guys, because I'm all about the context. It's one thing to say a stat. You need to know what it means. That is second worst in the ACC. 280 passing yards per game. It's only behind Wake Forest. Yikes. That's not very good. Second worst pass defense in the ACC. Ooh. And it's bottom 15 in the entire country. In the entire FBS of 134 teams, they are a bottom 15 secondary in the country. Actually, their strength of their defense is their linebacking unit. So maybe throwing the ball over the middle of the field could be challenging, especially in the short, intermediate passing game. But at the same time, if you just run play action, you force the linebackers to sell out against the run, well, then you could throw over top of them and the middle of the field can be wide open for you. So you can solve that pretty easily with Stanford's talented linebackers. Another reason why this Stanford secondary isn't very good is really on their defensive front. Generating pressure is so critical in football. You want to know the secret defense? It's much easier said than done, but it is the secret playbook for any defense, minus really the 85 Bears who just like to blitz 8 players every time. The secret? Generating pressure with 4 and dropping 7 into coverage. If you can do that on a consistent basis, teams are not going to be able to throw on you. With this Stanford team, they cannot generate pressure. They have 2 sacks through 2 games. 1 in each game. 1 against TCU, 1 against Cal Poly. So they can't really generate a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Pretty similar to Georgia Tech. We talked about in the lead up to the Georgia Tech game how, hey, a lot of people are saying that the Syracuse defense isn't great, right, against Ohio. But Georgia Tech's defense has not gotten a lot of pressure on the quarterback. How's that going to fare against Syracuse's passing attack? Well, we saw what happened. If you don't have a strong secondary, you definitely need to be able to generate pressure with 4 guys. They can't really do that at a high level. TCU threw the ball 42 times against Stanford. 42 times. And Stanford got 1 sack. Cal Poly threw the ball 30 times. And Stanford only managed 1 sack. That's a pretty ugly ratio. 2 sacks for 72 passing attempts. That's 1 out of every 36 passing attempts. There's going to be a sack. That is not very good for this Stanford secondary. So what do I expect? I think that Kyle McCord is going to have plenty of time behind this offensive line, which so far has been very, very good for Syracuse through 2 games. It has been exceptional. We haven't really had to talk about the offensive line because they have been really good. This is me giving them their flowers. They have been really good. I expect them to be good in this game once again. Kyle McCord is going to have ample time to throw. Their receivers should have a lot of very favorable one-on-one matchups aside from whoever's going against Colin Wright. So I think this is a game where Syracuse has the clear edge in passing offense versus passing defense. Syracuse, by the way, for some more stats for you guys all out there, for my stats nerds, did you know that Syracuse has the 3rd best passing attack in the entire country? That's right. I looked it up. 370 passing yards per game. That is 3rd best in the entire country. It just so happens also to be 2nd in the ACC because Miami is within our conference and they have an even better passing attack. A bottom 15 pass defense against a top 3 passing offense. It's pretty favorable in Syracuse's favor, wouldn't you say? Now, not to get too cocky, obviously our run defense was pathetic in week 1 against Ohio, going against the vaunted Georgia Tech rushing attack, and we shut them down pretty good. Syracuse shut them down. So it can be done. These are Division I athletes. But on paper, this seems like a mismatch where Syracuse should have ample time to throw the ball with favorable one-on-one matchups on the outside. And I can give you guys a bold prediction right now. I think that Zeed Haynes is going to have a 50-plus yard touchdown on a play-action play. That's right, I said it. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't know the exact design of the play, but I think it's going to be play-action, 50-plus yards down the field to Zeed Haynes for a touchdown. Now, because I said that, watch it actually happen on Friday night against Stanford, but then Zeed Haynes gets tackled at the 1-yard line. Just watch. It's going to happen. And I'm going to be like, well, I was 99% correct. That's my bold prediction for you guys out there, for those that are into bold predictions. So overall, Syracuse is a very favorable matchup with Stanford's secondary. They have to be able to attack it at a consistent level. This is one of those games where you can throw the ball 35, 40 times and not have to rely so much on the running game. I expect a big day from Kyle McCord and this passing offense. Now, coming up, we're going to shift gears to the defensive side of the ball because Stanford has a couple, yes, I said couple, of mobile quarterbacks. So, what does Syracuse have to do? Well, they got to contain them. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and we have something a little different for you now. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. And Syracuse football faces Stanford on Friday evening, and the odds have been released. Syracuse is an 8.5-point favorite to get the W at home, and the Orange's money line, I believe, is minus 345. All you got to do to bet that is just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, Locked On Syracuse fans, have you ever heard about ROY? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and, well, most of all, keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. Yes, that's right. You got a favorite athlete, you can keep them out of the transfer portal with ROY. As you all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. ROY changes the NIL game for fans. ROY allows fans to directly back their favorite college athletes. With ROY, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness, NIL, potential. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan's support. If not, the money is returned to the fan. So let's say you have a favorite athlete on the Syracuse basketball team and you give them money through ROY. If that athlete goes into the transfer portal, you get your money back, period. By using ROY, fans not only support athletes financially, but also become part of their name, image, and likeness journey, helping them succeed both on and off the field. Download ROY for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to earn $5,000 in cash. Visit joinroy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get the ROY app for iOS or Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Use referral code LOCKEDON for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for more details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with ROY. Stanford has not one, but two mobile quarterbacks who are likely to see the field tomorrow night against Syracuse. They got their starter, Ashton Daniels, obviously very mobile, as I mentioned, and their backup, who we're pretty familiar with, if you're a Syracuse fan, obviously, Justin Lamson. And if you're not familiar with him, he was a Syracuse recruit. He was on Syracuse, I believe, for a couple of seasons, and then he transferred over to Stanford a couple of years ago. So this is someone who we're sort of familiar with. He never really got his opportunity with the Orange. Now, they have to contain them, obviously. They're mobile guys. But why do they have to contain them? Is there a reason? There is a difference between when they played Georgia Tech and containing Haynes King and containing these two quarterbacks. With Haynes King at Georgia Tech, if you contain him, if you keep him within the pocket, you have a chance, so to speak. Haynes King can still beat you with his arm. He can. He's a really good quarterback, one of the better Power 4 quarterbacks in the country. If you contain him in the pocket, he's a little bit more vulnerable, but he can still beat you. Right? And I think Syracuse did a pretty good job against Haynes King. But with these two quarterbacks on Stanford, with all due respect, if you keep them in the pocket, they don't have a chance. They don't. They do not. The stats back it up. Ashton Daniels has a career completion percentage under 60% in about 400 career passing attempts. That's a pretty big sample. Not very good, not consistently accurate, can't consistently read a defense. Can't do it. Consistently within the pocket. Now, if he's moving outside and using his legs and extending plays, well, then you can be in trouble. But inside the pocket, forcing him to make quick decisions, that's going to work into Syracuse's hands. All right? And if you look at how he did against TCU, go look at his throwing numbers. They weren't that great. It was under 50. He was 17 for 35. I believe he had less than 200 passing yards. And he also had an interception. Ashton Daniels isn't the greatest quarterback in the world. This is not Haynes King. It's not. Okay? If you contain him in the pocket, you will win. Unlike having a chance against a guy like Haynes King. And with Justin Lamson, he has less of a sample. He has 89 career passing attempts. But his completion percentage in those 89 passing attempts, you ready for it? You know, I root for the guy. He was at Syracuse. Under 44%. I get it. It's a small sample. Under 44%. If you contain these guys in the pocket, force them to make quick decisions, whoever's out on the field, it doesn't really matter. Syracuse is going to have a great defensive day. This is the type of game where you can force 3 Stanford turnovers. Talked about last week during the bye week of how if we're going to nitpick Syracuse and what they can do better, forcing turnovers is one of them. I think Syracuse only has 1 turnover forced through 2 games. This is the type of game where I think Syracuse can have 3 of them against Stanford because these quarterbacks are incredibly vulnerable. Now, when they play Georgia Tech, the Georgia Tech game is very relevant in some aspects to this game because when they played Georgia Tech, they obviously had to do so without all ACC linebacker Marlo Wax. Okay, he hurt himself at the end of the Ohio game late in the third quarter. He's going to be back hopefully in about a month. He has a lower body injury, leg, ankle, I don't know, foot, I don't know. But he's out. He's not playing tomorrow either. No chance. To compensate for that, we've talked about the adjustment that Syracuse made on defense, and that is essentially playing a 3-3-5. A 3-3-5 is 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 players in the secondary. They did that by moving Fidel Diggs to linebacker. And obviously, it worked against Georgia Tech. It really did. Georgia Tech was neutralized for the majority of the game, aside from the final 8 minutes when Syracuse was playing prevent defense, which prevent defense evidently doesn't prevent anything. You just got to play normal. Side note, I mean, if you're an Eagles fan, I'm sorry. But you get the idea. It was really good. It worked. Fidel Diggs had a heck of a game. He had that big stop on 4th and 1. They were able to contain Haynes King's legs at a high level, aside from a couple breakdowns on a couple run touchdowns that he had, right? Derek McDonald misses the tackle in the backfield, and then everyone just stops playing because they thought he was down. And then the second one, Deuce Chestnut took a poor angle, and it led to a touchdown. But for the most part, they did a very nice job of keeping Haynes King within the pocket by using a 3-3-5 defense. So I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you that that's what Syracuse is going to do against Stanford, but it did work against Georgia Tech. So you're playing against a couple more mobile quarterbacks. Will they run the same scheme without Marlo Wax once again to contain these mobile guys? That is the main question that I have. It's really just what scheme are they going to run? But overall, the main point of emphasis is that if you contain Ashton Daniels, keep him within the pocket. You keep Justin Lamson inside the pocket. They don't have much of a shot. Or at least they have improved that they can consistently beat you from within the pocket, making quick decisions. They haven't proven it yet. So you got to contain them in the pocket. Now coming up, Stanford has one really explosive weapon on offense. If Syracuse not only wants to win this game, but potentially blow them out and really make a statement on Friday night on ESPN, you don't necessarily have to shut this guy down, but you do have to contain him. I love going to live sporting events, and it honestly doesn't really matter what the sport is. In fact, I'm actually, at the time you're probably watching this, it's premiering at 6 p.m. on today, obviously on Thursday. I'm on my way to the Jets-Patriots game. And I just love the energy in the building. And the way I actually get tickets, and the way I got tickets for this game, is by using Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite feature is the curated deals. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., whatever event you want. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets, sports tickets, or whatever you want with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Stanford has one really explosive weapon on offense, and we've talked about him a little on this podcast over these last few days, and that is wide receiver Elic Ayomanor. And in order for Syracuse to not only win, but to potentially blow out Stanford, they cannot let Elic Ayomanor, their number one weapon, run wild on them. I know I said run wild, but he is a wide receiver. You get the idea. They cannot let this guy go completely off because he is the one real weapon on offense that can beat you. He can single-handedly change the game. This is Stanford's, in summary, because we talked about him on, I believe, Sunday's podcast. In summary, for you guys who maybe missed that, he is their best player on the team overall, Elic Ayomanor. Best player on the team, number one wide receiver. He led Stanford in every receiving category last season. Catches, yards, touchdowns. That's the Triple Crown. Had 1,000 of them, or 1,000 yards last season. He is a legit NFL prospect. Legit. This guy is the real deal. And Syracuse cannot let him beat them. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, hold him to 2 catches for 17 yards. No. I'm not saying that. But when they played Georgia Tech, once again, we're going back to the Georgia Tech game. They have a couple of really good receivers on Georgia Tech. They have Malik Rutherford, and they have Eric Singleton Jr. And Eric Singleton Jr. had, I think, 5 catches, 85 yards. He had that one big play in the second quarter. It was like a 40-yard bomb. And Malik Rutherford had 7 catches, but only 38 yards. I am not asking for Syracuse to set, or I mean, I would love it if it happens, but I am not expecting that Syracuse is like, hey, Elic Ayomanor, you are only going to have, once again, 2 catches for 17 yards. But can you hold him to 5 catches for 80 yards? Or 6 catches for 70? You know, a respectable outing. He's going to get his, but don't let him beat you with 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Sound fair enough, right? The way Syracuse has to do it, they got to double him. He is their main weapon. They don't have much else after him. I'm going to get to it in a second, but they really don't. They got to bracket him. That's a fancy way of saying double, whether that's having one defender over the top, one defender specifically on him, so that's basically safety help, or having a defender for an inside or an outside route. It doesn't matter. You just have to have 2 guys on him, on Elic Ayomanor. I mentioned just now that there's a reason behind this, that they have one main guy. Go back to the TCU game. So I don't really care what happened against Cal Poly, unless it's something negative on Stanford's whatever. Elic Ayomanor had 7 catches for over 100 yards against TCU. A very, very good day. Very good day, right? Their next leading receiver had 17 yards. I am not joking. Their next leading receiver against TCU had 17 yards. In other words, there is one guy you really got to focus on. There is one guy who can probably beat you with one-on-one. One. Every other receiver, every other pass catcher on Stanford, Syracuse should have the edge in the secondary with one-on-one coverage. Period. End of story. I mean, how can you have a 100-yard receiver and and Ashton Daniels had less than 200 yards passing in the game? Let that marinate. Ashton Daniels had 185 passing yards against TCU, and over 100 of them went to Elic Ayomanor. So that's well over 50%. You're looking at 60% of the passing game with one guy. If you can somewhat slow him down with double coverage, force him into 6 catches for 80 yards, they're not going to be able to throw the ball much. This is not a team with a lot of weapons. It's very anti-Syracuse on offense. They are the I can't say the word actually because I can't. Antithesis. I can't say it. But you get the idea. It's definitely an SAT word for those that are for my younger audience out there. They are the exact opposite. Stanford's got 2 mobile quarterbacks. Syracuse has 1 quarterback. He's not very mobile in Kyle McCord, although he did have that nice run against Georgia Tech. But I think we can all agree he's not the most mobile dude in the world. Stanford's got 1 really good weapon. Syracuse has a bunch of really good weapons. Right? If you were to double team Oronde Gadsden, that's cool. You can do that, but that leaves Trebor Pena one-on-one. Okay, you could take away Trebor Pena, but now you got Zeed Haynes and Umari Hatcher with one-on-one coverage. Maybe they're going against a linebacker. That's not favorable for you. Oh, you can somehow slow them all down. That's cute. Now Syracuse has 2 receiving backs, LeQuint Allen and Will Nixon. There is a big difference between the Syracuse offense and the Stanford offense. Stanford's offense is run through 2 mobile quarterbacks and 1 elite wide receiver. Syracuse, a pocket passer with a bunch of weapons and a pretty strong rushing attack as well. With LeQuint Allen, Will Nixon, we'll see if we see Sean Willis in this game. And I'm not even mentioning Justice Ross Simmons, who could be back from injury. Where is he going to fit in? I mentioned that literally at the top of the podcast. The Colorado State transfer for Syracuse, the wide receiver. I don't know. But there's a lot of weapons. So this is 2 completely different offenses, 2 completely different defensive strategies. Overall, it is a very, very favorable matchup on paper for Syracuse. I'm kind of surprised that the line is only 8.5 points, but I think it just goes to show you that despite having an edge in a lot of categories on the field, this is still a conference opponent, and you have to take them seriously. But I'm telling you, if they're able to attack Stanford's weak secondary and weak pass rush, if they can contain their mobile quarterbacks and not let Elic Ayomanor have the greatest receiving day in the history of the world, not turn him into Calvin Johnson, Syracuse is not going to have much trouble in this game. And hopefully they don't. Having said that, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel. Turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And everyone, take care.